It's time for us to check back in with Watermelon Hill and see what happens next. If you've missed any of the previous readings, just look in the description below for a playlist. And if you'd like to purchase a copy of this wonderful book, Watermelon Hill, please visit watermelonhillbook.com, and I'll also put that link in the description below. Guns and hunting. It may seem unusual, or maybe even a little barbaric to many of today's people, but guns were a very important part of our lives as we grew up on Watermelon Hill. I don't know at what age I first shot a gun, but it was well before I started school. I remember shooting a .22 caliber rifle while resting the barrel on one of my older brother's shoulder. I was too small to hold it up by myself, but I could hit what I was aiming at. We grew up around guns and learned to use them at a very early age, but it was drilled into us so we could never forget that they were very dangerous and had to be handled with great respect and care. My dad said, "Never point a gun at anything you don't want to kill." Very good advice, and I've followed it all my life. We did a lot of target practice as well as hunting. We killed a lot of targets, and the rules for both were very strict. If we were target practicing, no one, adults included, was allowed to be on the same line with the person shooting unless that person was young or unfamiliar with firearms and needed supervision or help. Everyone else had to stay in back. It may sound safe to be beside the person firing instead of behind, but if the weapon is semi-automatic, the empties are ejected to the side in most cases and can be quite dangerous to the eyes. We were not allowed to go hunting at all until we were already very familiar with firearms and able to handle them safely. When we did go hunting, it was usually for rabbits or quail, so we would spread out in an even line across the field. No one was allowed to fall behind. If one person was delayed, the others would wait for him, and absolutely no one would forge ahead of the line. That's a good way to get killed. If we got a rabbit up, it would usually run ahead and give someone a shot, but sometimes the rabbit would do a reverse and run right back through the line. If a hunter didn't know what he was doing, he might turn to shoot the rabbit and shoot one of the hunters instead. We all knew we had to let that rabbit go. I know these days hunting gets a lot of bad press, and some even think it should be banned completely. Please understand that we used any game that we killed. It was a very welcome variation from our usual meat, which was cured pork or an occasional Sunday chicken. I was 12 years old when I ate beef for the first time at my Uncle Charlie's. As far as wild meat, we ate rabbit most often, but also quail, squirrel, and even an occasional groundhog. Regardless of what you may have learned from the Beverly Hillbillies show, we did not eat buzzard eggs, owl gizzards, or possum innards. But according to the older family members, we had been known to eat a possum or two, minus the innards. One game animal we did not eat was deer, but not because of any reluctance to eat venison. We would have welcomed it with great pleasure. By 1960, there had not been an open season on deer in Kentucky for over 50 years. We had never seen a deer on our farm or at any place within 100 miles. While I was in high school, a stalking program was initiated, and within a few years, deer were making an appearance again. By the mid-60s, it was common to see them on our farm, and there was an open season again. It was only one day a year for a start, but Kentucky had deer again. Still, we never killed a deer. When deer started appearing on the farm, they were still protected by Mom. It was common to see them in the apple orchard in the evenings or grazing in the hayfield right in front of our house in the early morning. She sort of adopted them as pets, and they were off limits. We all respected her wishes and just enjoyed watching them. During my younger years, I wanted to take a deer, but I guess I've lost my killer instinct as I've gotten older, and I would never kill one now unless I was in a situation where I needed it for food. In that case, though, Mr. or Mrs. Deer better watch out. There was good small game hunting on our farm, and if someone was courteous enough to come up to the house and ask, Dad would usually let them hunt, and if he had time, sometimes join them. If they didn't ask and he didn't know they were on the farm, that was another matter. He wouldn't hesitate to run them off in a heartbeat. Once Dad heard a shot on the other side of the barn and went to see about it. He got there just in time to see the hunter picking up a rabbit he had just shot inside our hog lot. Dad had a temper and he was bulling. The hunter said, "Well, since we're already here, can't we go ahead and hunt?" Dad suggested that he might want to leave right away while he could still walk. Upon quick consideration, the hunter decided that he would take Dad's suggestion and left. I learned to shoot a rifle at a very young age, but the first gun of my very own was a Red Ryder lever-action carbine BB gun, just like the one in the movie A Christmas Story that is shown on TV every year. I think I was about 8 or 9 when one of my older brothers gave it to me for Christmas, and just like the movie, I had never gotten a better present and didn't think I ever would. That BB gun was worn out, repaired and worn out a few more times before I gave up on it. I spent most of my spare change, when I had any, for BBs. Many thousands of BBs went through that gun. I bought my son one just like it when he was about the same age. I was about 7 or 8 when my brother Jack brought a couple of buddies home from school with him one afternoon. They were outside doing some shooting when I came out. Jack's buddies were shooting at a penny stuck in the side of a fence post and had not been able to hit it. When Jack saw me coming, he said, "Hey, I bet he can hit it." The other boy said, "Yeah, sure he can. Let the little kid try if he wants to." I rested the rifle on another post, took careful aim, and hit it almost dead center. Very satisfactory, shutting those big boys up. Jack knew I could do it. Dad's friend, John Burton, a barber in Louisa, had some of the best bird dogs in the county. A couple of times every hunting season he would bring his dogs out to have a quail hunt. I was about 14 the first time I was allowed to go along and was very excited about hunting with the dogs for the first time. I'd been hunting for a couple of years, but never with bird dogs before. We'd been hunting for some time, had flushed some birds, missed some, got some, when Mr. Burton came over near me and said, "You know, I've been watching you." I said, "No, sir, I hadn't noticed. Why were you watching me?" He told me that he never trusted a hunter he hadn't hunted with before until he watched how he handled himself, especially if it was a youngster. He said that I obviously knew what I was doing and that I was all right in his book. I was very flattered, and I guess my chest puffed out a little with pride as we continued with the hunt after such high praise coming from a veteran hunter like Mr. Burton. If you have never seen a good bird dog work, you have missed a thing of beauty. When John let the dogs out, they immediately started ranging back and forth over the field. His dogs were very well trained and responded instantly to voice or hand signals, going farther ahead, closer in, right or left. They are all filled with excitement, but it is controlled and they are all attention. They obviously love their work. They are beautiful dogs and are performing a ballet, but when they go on point, what a work of art. When the dog gets scent of a quail, he follows it up until he is close, but not close enough to flush the birds. Then with one front foot lifted, his nose snaps to the direction of the quail and he freezes. I mean, like a statue. The only movement you might see if you were close enough would be his nose quivering with nervous anticipation. No wonder there are so many paintings of bird dogs on point, but no photo or painting can portray the feeling of seeing it in person. That particular day, John had brought along a young dog that was partially trained to work with his best dog. The young dog learns from the older one and follows his example. For instance, when a dog points some birds, the other dog has to honor his point. This means that he points also, but always a little back from the first dog to point, never ahead of him or even with him. Quail lay 15 or more eggs in the spring, and the family stays together until next spring and nesting time again. The family group is known as a covey of quail, so the dog usually points a whole covey of between 10 and 20 birds. When the dog points, the hunters move in position for a shot, and only then is the dog given a signal to move ahead and flush the birds. Now this may sound like shooting fish in the proverbial barrel, but nothing could be further from the truth. If you're going quail hunting for the first time, you will be lucky to even get off a shot the first time you flush a covey. They don't just flutter away, they take off in an explosion of noise and movement. Sometimes the covey will all go in the same general direction, but much more often they will scatter out like a fan, and if you are not too shaken by the flush, maybe you will get off a shot, and if you do get off a shot, maybe you will hit one. The odds are with the quail unless you are pretty good. If someone in the group gets a hit, then with the command, "dead bird," the dog becomes a retriever. The owner of the dog uses hand signals to send him in the general direction the bird went down, and the dog finds it by scent. After the dog finds the bird, he doesn't eat it or chew it up, but very gently takes it into his mouth, brings it back, and drops it at his master's feet. Everything a good bird dog does, he does with great care and enthusiasm and enjoyment. It is no wonder the owner of a good bird dog values him so highly. During this same hunt, we were going around the lower side of the fields near the rock cliffs overlooking the river, when we noticed one of the dogs was missing. We'd crossed some gullies and lost sight of him. John called, but the dog did not respond. This was his best dog, not the young one, so John said, "Well, he must be on some birds." That would be the only reason he wouldn't come. I asked him how long he would stay on point, and he said if it was the young dog, maybe just a few minutes, but that dog will stay on point until the birds move. Sure enough, about a half an hour later, here he came and went right back to hunting. The dog was worth his weight in gold to a dedicated quail hunter. I've been hunting with bird dogs many other times since that day, but that first experience has always been very special to me. We never had any high-powered rifles on the farm, but always had shotguns and .22 caliber rifles. I never knew Dad to own a handgun either, but there was always someone visiting who had one, so we got trained on various kinds of handguns as well. In 1962, I joined the Army and had basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky. The firing range was my favorite place. With my past experience, I scored expert easily and was put to work coaching the city boys who had never touched a firearm before. Every time any of the older brothers, cousins, uncles, etc. came for a visit, there was always a shooting match. They usually brought a gun or two with them, and we always had some at home. The weapon of choice was usually a .22 caliber rifle because you could do a lot of shooting and target practice for very little money. .22 cartridges were cheap then and still are today. Usually we didn't have any bullseye targets or anything you would find on a target range, but some of our targets were much tougher. A favorite target was empty .22 cartridges. That is a target about 1/8 inch by 3/4 inch high. We would line them up on a fence post and pick them off one at a time. If that was too easy, we would back up and do it again until we reached a point where a winner could be determined. From longer distances, we shot tin cans or bottles or green walnuts. They make a very satisfying little explosion when hit. My brother Lawrence has even lit a match with the bullet without knocking the match down. The barn sat on a low hill above the house, and the bank just below the barn was a favorite backstop for shooting. There were so many boxes of shells shot into that hillside, I bet you could mine lead from it. Dad always used a single-shot 12-gauge shotgun when he went hunting, and when I was 12 years old, he bought a single-shot 20-gauge shotgun for me to hunt with. Was I ever proud of that gun? There were two reasons it was a single shot. One was that it was much less expensive than a pump or semi-auto. The second reason was that Dad said it would make me a better shot. I have seen hunters empty a repeating shotgun when a covey of quail would flush. True, they might get some birds, but it wasn't necessarily by skill. When you throw enough lead out there, you're bound to hit something. Dad said if I only had one shot, I would take more time and make it count, and he was right. It was a 20 gauge because it fit my size better than a 12 gauge. You also get to be a better shot if you're not in pain from shooting a gun that has too much of a kick for your size. When my son Steve was old enough, I bought a single shot 20 gauge for him to start on, just like I did, and gave him the same speech my dad had given me. I'm afraid it was not the same gun, though. I had traded it off over the years and had a 12-gauge pump for myself. Still, I rarely took more than one shot. My early training with a single shot made me take my time, pick out one bird, and concentrate on it. I still believe a single-shot shotgun would be the best for any young hunter to start with. I was only allowed to hunt with Dad or an older brother for the first year or so, but by the time I was 13, I was allowed to go out by myself. Mom wasn't too hot on the ideal, but Dad won that round. During hunting season, I would come home from school, do what chores and homework I had to do, and some afternoons have time to hunt for an hour or two if it was Saturday, longer. We never hunted on Sundays. Mom was firm on that rule. I didn't have to go far to hunt. The whole farm had good hunting when you got less than 100 yards from the house. I had favorite places, though, depending on what I was hunting. For squirrel, there was only one area on our farm near George Riggs' land where there was a whole forest of huge beech trees. Squirrels would nest in the trees and eat the beech nuts. It was also in this area and sometimes over on George Riggs' land that occasionally I would flush a ruffed grouse. We never flushed one with bird dogs, so I never got one in my life. Grouse are usually singles, not a covey like quail. Good thing, because a lone grouse can sound like a whole covey of quail, and when it flushes just a few feet in front of you, you're very lucky to get off a shot. And if you aren't rattled enough by the noise, they don't fly off like quail. Oh no! Grouse are usually found in wooded areas, and on our land that also meant hills, so they take off in an explosion, hug the ground up and down hills while weaving in and out between trees. I never got a grouse, but I injured a few trees. Quail and rabbit were found pretty much all over the farm, but there were a few favorite places that could almost always be depended upon to provide a rabbit. Just like briar rabbit, they really do prefer briar patches as they are good cover from hawks and foxes, but they can also be found in woods, fields, etc., depending on the weather. If it is cold and windy, they will usually be someplace protected, not out in an open field. I enjoyed hunting with other people, but I do believe my favorite hunting was when I went out by myself. The quiet and solitude were very relaxing. Sometimes it didn't really matter to me if I got any game or not. Usually I would hunt seriously, but once in a while I would just sit and listen. Listen to the sounds of the woods, birds, small animals scurrying in the underbrush, the wind in the trees, in other words, nature. Sometimes I would just listen to the silence, silly as that may seem. The best time for that was just after a snowfall. Most animals would still be under cover somewhere out of the storm, and along with the natural sound absorbing quality of snow, everything would seem hushed, and you tended to look around with a sort of reverence at the beauty of nature. Maybe corny, but true. One day, however, I found that it can also be very dangerous. This was quite a sobering experience and taught me a lifelong lesson in taking caution. I was hunting by myself in some hilly woods more than a quarter of a mile from home. There was a light snow on the ground, which was good because I could see rabbit tracks in it and follow them up. My shotgun had an external hammer, and I was expecting a rabbit to jump up at any second. So my thumb was resting on the hammer. It wasn't cocked, just ready. I had just started up a hill when my foot slipped in the snow, and as I started to go down, my thumb caught the hammer enough so that when it slipped off, the gun discharged. I looked down and there was a hole in the snow no more than 3 inches in front of my right toe, exactly where it had been before it slipped. In a couple of seconds, the reality set in that I could have shot my foot off. A shotgun can do unbelievable damage at close range, and I could have easily gone into shock and bled to death before I got back to the house. No one would have heard me call for help. I just sat down in the snow and had to stay there for a while before I could go on. My legs had turned to rubber. Never again did I have my thumb anywhere near the hammer until it was time to shoot. I never told anyone about my near tragedy until after I had grown up. If Mom or Dad had found out, I would probably have lost my shotgun for a year or two. This incident made me more careful, but did not diminish my love of hunting or guns. I hunted small game for many years and even killed a couple of wild hogs in Florida, but never shot a deer. I still enjoy shooting, and at family reunions we still have a trap shooting competition or target competition with 22 rifles. I've not been hunting for several years now, and like I said, I've lost my killer instinct, but if I had the opportunity, I would still not turn down a quail hunt with a good bird dog. Rat killing. Living on a farm as we did, we always had dogs and cats as well as farm animals. Mom and Dad would never allow them in the house, but we always had at least one and sometimes 3 or 4 of each around the farm. The cats were almost vital to keep down the population of mice and rats that all farms seem to have. Our corn crib was lined with wire mesh, but still mice always found their way in, set up housekeeping, and raised a family. We couldn't put poison in with the corn because it would be fed to the animals, so the mice were a problem. When the supply of corn began to get low enough so that it could be shifted from one end of the crib to the other, we would have a rat killing, as Jerry Clower called it, or more correctly, a mouse killing. A couple of us boys would go into the crib with sticks and gradually throw the corn from one end of the crib to the other. The mice would go deeper into the pile of corn, and the new pile on the other end of the crib would be mouse-free. As the old pile became smaller and smaller, some of the mice would try to make a break for it, and we would try to kill them before they got into the other pile. We had to be very alert, but we still missed several. Sometimes we would take a cat into the corn crib to help us, but much of the time our cats were too wild to be confined to a small space, if we could even catch them at all. But when we did have a cat that was tame, it was a real asset to us. My brother Jack and I once took a cat that was a great mouser into the crib with us. She got right into the spirit of the hunt and could catch and kill the mice with much greater efficiency than we could possibly do. I saw her once with 4 mice at one time. She had 1 in the claws of each front paw and 2 in her mouth. The reason some of our cats were wild was because living outside as they did, they would sometimes deliver a litter in some hiding place, and we would not find them for weeks. If we didn't find them soon after their eyes opened, they were hard to tame. When I was in high school, a kitten was needed for a school play, and since I knew we had a litter at home, I volunteered to bring one in. Unfortunately, Mama Cat had delivered in the abandoned old cellar under the barn. The entrance was all grown up with weeds and briars, so the kittens had almost no contact with humans. I tried valiantly to come through with a kitten for the play. I caught and tried to calm each one, but when all was said and done, my hands looked like they had gone through a meat grinder, and I still had no kitten to take to school, or at least not one I wanted to unleash on the school. Once in a great while, when I was roaming over the farm, usually around the rock cliffs, I would see a cat that looked like your garden variety house cat, but was as wild as any wild animal I have ever seen. They had dens under the rock cliffs, and I was lucky to just catch a glimpse of one. When I did, they were gone in a flash. They may have been some of our cats, or from some neighboring farm that had reverted to the wild, or they may have been living and breeding there for generations as feral cats, but they were alive and well. Cats have been pets since before the pyramids were built, but they can still revert back to the wild in no time, even if they have already been pets. They have a naturally independent nature and only stick around humans as long as the food is good. They can catch their own just fine. We'll stop right there for today. Interesting peek into Dale's memories of hunting and kind of the camaraderie of hunting that surrounded it, all the men together, the bird dogs. Especially, interesting as always to someone like me that likes to kind of eat off the good earth. Interesting to hear about how they utilized the food. They didn't just kill for sport. They were eating everything that they killed. In fact, they needed it. Like he said, their pork by the following year, it was about all gone, and then that meant that you weren't going to get any meat, any pork until maybe in the fall, November, December, when it got cold and you had another hog killing. Now, I've never been a hunter, but I grew up in a family of people who were hunters, who again hunted because it was twofold, for the meat to eat, and then also because they enjoyed that camaraderie. When he was talking about the bird dogs, no one in my family hunted with bird dogs or anything like that. But my Papa Wade, he was a coon hunter, so there was the camaraderie of that. He was also a fox hunter. In a lot of cases, those kind of hunters, they hunt because of the dogs, to hear the dogs run. That's a common thing that you'll hear. Not so much in those to actually kill the animal and eat it. Although in old days, whether they ate it or not, like he was comparing to the hillbillies, often they would skin the animal and then tan the hide, and then they sold that for money. That was a source of income, to tan the hides of coons or foxes or whatever animal it was. But certainly eating, like the rabbits and the even groundhogs. Matt has a dear friend who still eats groundhogs, and he likes to catch them, especially maybe if they're getting in somebody's garden, and he'll come and he'll catch it for you, catch it in a live trap, take it home, and then fatten it up on the food that he wants it to eat, and then kill it and eat it. And I've never ate groundhog, but Matt ate his, and he liked it. He thought it was good. Along with that camaraderie, like I was talking about, that Dale kind of describes too. Of course, he does say that he enjoyed hunting by himself. Matt certainly enjoys hunting by himself. He enjoys that. But he also enjoys the camaraderie of thinking of, Matt is a deer hunter, thinking of the deer camp, of the men there that gather each year. That's just one of his favorite places to be, and he has such wonderful, fond memories. But also those memories, like Dale does, of someone teaching you how to respect and to understand that guns are dangerous and that you've got to be careful and all those things. So that's also, like, I grew up in a house that there was always guns there, but from an early age. Even my brothers both were, well versed in how to shoot them and all that. I was never, not because nobody wouldn't let me, just I had no interest in that. But even I was taught how dangerous they can be and how you've got to respect the gun, and kind of, I appreciate that Dale went through that. Even whether they were target practicing or whether they were hunting, where that was the number one concern, was safety, was everyone's safety. So that was certainly true in my house growing up, and has been today as far as Corey and Katie growing up with me and Matt. Now, Corey and Katie did hunt some. They did hunt with Matt, where I just never had an interest in that. I like to sit out there and watch and look, but I don't have any interest in actually having the gun and actually harvesting animals. But Corey and Katie used to hunt with Matt, and it was something. They have such great memories. They don't today, neither one of them, but they have those memories, and they had that experience. They both like to target practice with Matt. Again, I'm not into that, but Matt really likes it, and the girls do. And my brother Steve, he's crazy about guns, so he's a lot of times in my videos, if you've watched them often, you've probably heard gunshots. That's Steve, target practice. So I enjoyed all that, and it still rung true, the things that Dale talked about in my family growing up, and then certainly in mine and Matt's family. Interesting when he talked about the scarcity of deer. That's how, when I was growing up, that's how things were here. You never seen a deer. Like my brother Steve did deer hunt. My Uncle Henry was a deer hunter. They had to go somewhere else. They couldn't just go up into the woods here and hunt deer. You never seen them. They just was not here. It was very rare. I remember my whole childhood, I seen one deer, and I could still, it's imprinted in my memory. It was so rare. It was after Sunday, after church, and we always would go to Granny Gazzy's to eat Sunday dinner. And we were going, in those days, for local people that might know, Hedden Road was gravel. It was still gravel. And we would go down from Martins Creek, New Martins Creek Church there, go down the gravel road, and then, get on the 4-lane and go out towards Ranger, towards Culberson, where Granny lived, in the Ranger community. And we were on that road, and I still remember exactly where it was at, and we saw a deer. It was all of us together, and it was just like you would have thought we seen a zebra. We were so excited. Now today, skip ahead till today, I can barely go from here, from where I live, down to Clay's Corner in Brasstown without seeing not just one deer, but sometimes fields of deer. It's the same way going the other direction through Martins Creek. There are so many deer. And then again, if you watch my videos, you know that Matt does harvest deer around our house. So such a drastic difference than in the days when I was a child, or Dale seen the same thing happen when he was a child and there was no deer, and then when they got to be deer, and how his mother really enjoyed them, you know, being able to see them and stuff. So again, just another similarity. All the shoots, the kind of target practicing and contests that Dale was talking about, I've seen my family do that too. The men get together and they would shoot and, you know, see who could outshoot each other or try out guns. Like I said, Steve loves to target practice. Sometimes Matt and Corey and Katie will go down there with him. Sometimes his kids are there doing it with him. When Pap was a boy, he talked about turkey shoots. I've written about them on the Blind Pig and the Acorn, and I might have mentioned them in a video, but you wasn't really shooting a turkey. Often it was held like maybe at the local little country store or something like that, and so people would gather and they would have the contest, and then whoever won would win a turkey, for like a, you know, one might have been live, but maybe one that was already ready to eat, or maybe it was a ham. You know, they would win something for doing that, but it would people would gather, and they still have those in places even here. I don't think not as often as when Pap was a boy, but a lot of times now they'll do them kind of as a fundraiser, so you have to pay to enter, and then there is a prize, but maybe that money's going for something, you know, to benefit something. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention that Dale talked about, he's talking about the rats. Well, again, if you watch my videos, you already know, like, I'm not afraid of snakes. A lot of people ask me, like, you're in the garden, aren't you afraid of snakes coming around? I'm not. Snakes don't bother me. I used to be afraid of spiders, but I haven't been in years. I'm not afraid of spiders. The things that I don't like when it comes to things like that, and I'm not afraid of the bears in the woods or ticks or anything like that. I'm thinking of the things people ask me about, but is rats and mice. I don't like them. So like Dale's description of moving the corn, I'm just like, I can't stand it. Thinking about them scurrying out and then them trying to get them. That's just terrifying to me. But the cats, he was saying how they, because of being on a farm, they had to have cats. We've never had cats, Matt and I. We have had dogs over the years. We don't have one currently, but we have Olive here a lot. So she's kind of like, she's here so much, I feel like we have a dog. But we've never had a cat. You know, it seems like people are either cat people or dog people kind of thing. But there has been cats, feral cats around our house. We see them sometimes. It seems like maybe they stay here a little bit and pass on to somewhere else, or something happens to them, I don't know. But sometimes we'll see, like, maybe go out on the porch at night and something will, kind of like the covey of quail that he was talking about, or a grouse that'll go off in an explosion and about scare you to death. It'll be a cat that's on the porch, and then it takes off when you come outside. So they have certainly been a few here, and like Dale was describing them, they just look like they're somebody's cat, you know, like a house cat, but they're just wild. And I've read online in magazines and different things that the feral cat population in some areas is so large that it has really impacted not just the rats and the mice, which might be, you know, a good thing, but bird population. So it's kind of like a real problem in certain areas. I've not noticed that here. We still have plenty of birds, and typically the cats that we see, not all the time, but maybe, you know, once a year or ever so often you might see one. Every few months or something like that. It's just one cat. It's not like, you know, it's not like there's a lot of them. So I thought that part was interesting. And him describing the covey of quail, the other thing he described, the grouse. We used to have lots of grouse here, and you know, I've heard different things of why the decline of them. Probably the number one thing would be the spread of man, you know, just taking over more and more of the natural areas. Also coyotes in our area, and I've heard different things. But I grew up with grouse being everywhere commonly, and they have a unique, like when they're drumming, almost sounds like if you think of a lawnmower or something trying to start. So I'd love to hear that sound again, but I ain't heard one in many years. Back when Corey and Katie was probably, I'd say Katie was maybe 13 or 12. She got a camera and got to where she was taking pictures of things. And somehow she found, on the way down to Granny's on the trail, she found two little grouse down there, like little young ones. And it's a good picture she took of them. and that may be the last time that I've ever known of a grouse even being here. But when I was a young girl playing, laying out in the sun, even all those things, it was just common to hear that noise. It was just part of, kind of like in the summer, like hearing a jar fly, you just heard grouse too. So I hope you enjoyed this part of the book where Dale was sharing about his memories of hunting and kind of telling about the way they looked at guns and how they used the meat, and kind of giving kind of the inside story, I guess, if you will. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Please leave a comment though and tell me what you enjoyed. And as always, I hope you drop back by next Friday. We've got to see what happens next in Watermelon Hill.